Team guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. I, Asha Divedi, on the behalf of International Center for Automotive Technology, Aspire Management, let me extend a very warm welcome to all of you for joining in the vehicle crash test. It is our privilege to have you all with us today on this webinar. ICAT is an International Center for Automotive Technology, Manesar, located in Northern Automotive Hub of India, is a leading world-class automotive testing, certification, and R&D service provider under the aegis of NATRIP, Government of India. Aspire is a technology platform. Aspire stands for Automotive Solutions Portal for Industry, Research, and Education. Aspire has taken an initiative of conducting the webinars for students on various topics, which is a part of celebration of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, which is 75th anniversary of our independence, of aiming to reinforce the Atmanirbhar Bharat in technology area. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Akshat Gupta from Passive Safety Lab, ICAT, to take the initiative.
Now it's audible. Good afternoon to all. My name is Akshat Gupta, and today I'm going to present on vehicle crash test. My screen visible? I cannot see it here. Okay.
So vehicle safety, we hear this term very often nowadays. What is vehicle safety? So anything which helps in increasing the safety of vehicle or the occupant on road comes under vehicle safety. Vehicle safety can be broadly classified into two main groups: active safety and passive safety.
Active safety, as the name suggests, so anything which plays a role in avoiding the crash, avoiding the fatality to the occupant comes under active safety. So active safety technology prevents the vehicle in going into a crash scenario. Active safety can further be classified into two parts. One category is which providing warning to the driver, and other is assisting the driver. So under the providing warning to the driver, active safety features provides information in form of signals, warnings about the running vehicle status. So the major technologies which are developed and available in today's vehicles is TPMS, which is tire pressure monitoring system. It equips the driver about the current status of the tire, and in case of a flat, it cautions the driver to park the vehicle and do the necessary change. Lane departure warning system. This is also a very important feature in today's vehicle, in which it warns the driver about any deviation in the lane the vehicle is traveling in. Other features are driver monitoring system, blind spot detection, which is very useful during turning. Intelligent speed assistance system. It basically in countries where there is proper signage of speed limitation, the system itself automatically detects the speed limit and controls the speed of the vehicle. The second category of active safety is more advanced, in which further to providing the warning to the driver, it takes action to a certain, it controls the vehicle parameters to a certain limit. Under this comes head-up display, autonomous emergency braking, which is very useful in avoiding vehicle crash as well as safety to the pedestrians. Anti-lock braking system, which is quite old technology now. ESC, electronic stability control. Adaptive cruise control, which is very useful in city driving. Night vision system. Now, the other safety group which we will going to be focusing on today is passive safety. Passive safety is active safety system. See, every system has its accuracy. So in case there is a crash, there is a casualty to the driver, there should be some system to avoid injuries, to minimize the injury, the casualty, the death. So all those equipments, technologies which work in this direction comes under passive safety. So passive safety is also can be divided into two parts. One which safeguards the vehicle occupants, the people sitting inside the vehicle, and the other the people which are outside the vehicle, the vulnerable road users, the pedestrians. So under vehicle occupants, there are primarily four major technologies which are being used, namely airbags, seat belts, whiplash protection system, which helps in reducing the neck injuries, whiplash injuries in the driver, and child safety systems. We are going to discuss this in details in the following slides. Under pedestrian safety, there are certain technologies available like pop-up bonnets and windshield airbag, which minimizes the injuries caused to the pedestrians. So elements of passive safety, as I already discussed, the major elements of a passive safety can be divided into like the front and the rear crumple zone, the structure, the main occupant cavity structure, airbags, seat belts, front and rear seat belts, side impact bars, which are useful in side crashes, and collapsible steering wheel. Coming to the crumple zone. So what is crumple zone? So earlier, like the vehicles used to be, the general perception of people was like the more heavier, the more rigid the car is, the more safer it will be. But this is something which goes opposite in passive safety. So during a crash is there is a impulse force which acts on the vehicle. So and there is a constant energy. So the more the vehicle is able to dissipate the energy, the better the car will be. And in order to dissipate the energy, physics says there should be more deformation. There should be absorption of energy. So the lesser the energy gets transferred to the occupant, the driver, the better the vehicle is in minimizing the casualty. So the structure which plays important role in this is the front structure, the structure in forward of the windshield, the firewall and the bumper. So as you can see, I have compared two scenarios. In scenario A, the force is acting on a lesser time, but the magnitude of force is high. Considering that the crash involves constant energy, this scenario will cause more injuries to the driver since the magnitude of force has increased and all the force will be transferred to the occupant. In scenario B, the width of the pulse has increased. So what is happening here is that during the crash, the time of energy dissipation has increased. So considering the area under the curve as constant, the magnitude of force is decreased, which helps in minimizing the injuries to the occupant. So the major part which plays an important role in this is known as crumple zone. So you must have seen there is, like, in the vehicle forward structure of the vehicle, there are crush cans which are designed to deform under the crash scenario. This deformation, however, has to be controlled and should be in a specified way. So majority of the force gets absorbed by this crumple zone, the crash cans, so that minimal energy is being transferred to the rearward parts, which is like engine block, transmission, and the firewall. Now, once these forces are absorbed at the crumple zone, the remaining forces which are transferred to the occupant cabin has to be dealt with. So for these, there are three major elements: the airbags, the seat belt, and deformation zone, which is same as crumple zone. So airbags, every one of us have heard about airbags. Airbags are basically air cushions which comes into picture during a crash. Airbags are also known as secondary restraint system. So you must have seen in the vehicle there is generally a inscribed word on the dashboard as SRS. So this SRS is nothing but secondary restraint system. Why it's secondary restraint system? Because this is generally not in direct contact with the occupant, whereas the seat belts are called primary restraint system because they are in direct contact with the occupant and they control the motion of the occupant during the crash. Let's go further into detail. Safety belts are, like, there are different types of safety belts. Today I am only going to discuss the most common safety belts being used in the vehicle and what are the emerging technologies that are coming up in safety belts nowadays to prevent major injuries to the driver. So in today's vehicle, two types of belts are generally used. One is 2-point belt, also known as lap belt. It is generally seen in the rear seat center occupant. So this kind of belt just restrains the driver only through the lower extremities, and the upper body of the occupant is still free under motion. So this belt has very minimal performance in avoiding injuries to the occupant during crash. Another type of seat belt which is majorly used in today's vehicle is 3-point safety belt. So now coming to the technologies which have been developed over the years in 3-point belts are 3-point ELR, which is known as emergency locking retractor. So, and this is the basic seat belt which is present in any of the vehicle, any of the car. So how does emergency locking retractor works? So generally when you put on a seat belt, 3-point seat belt holds you from the shoulder, the upper torso, and the lap, like the thigh part, the pelvic part. So in a normal scenario, you can extract the webbing, you can adjust the webbing length from the retractor, you can pull it with a force and there would be no locking. But in case of sudden impact, in case of sudden force, there is a spool inside the retractor which under sudden force, under centrifugal force, it expands and it gets locked. So you can physically try this in your vehicle also. If you try to snap the belt suddenly with a jerk, it will get stuck. It will not move until and unless you release the webbing and then pull it again. So that feature is called ELR, emergency locking retractor. Now, once this ELR was developed, it was observed that during the crash, the seat belt restrained the driver, and due to very high force, there was a force from the seat belt onto the torso, which resulted in the compressive force on the chest. So just imagine, like in case of crash, the occupant due to momentum tries to go forward and the belt restrains you with such high force that it causes internal injuries inside the chest and bruising marks. So they developed an additional feature called as RPLL. So RPLL is nothing but a pre-tensional load limiter. So what does load limiter does? During a crash, after a sudden, when there is a sudden, the load reaches a certain value, load limiter comes into picture and it releases the webbing from the retractor. So this results in a controlled forward motion of the upper torso during a crash. So the load limiter value is basically set by a OEM based on the restraint system optimization, like the various parameters, the design of the vehicle, and its value is set generally in kilonewtons, like 10 kilonewton, 8 kilonewton, 9 kilonewton. So once the force reaches that particular value, the load limiter comes into picture and it starts to release the webbing slowly to control the motion of the body. There is another term which you can see is pre-tensioner. So pre-tensioner is nothing but, as the name suggests, during the crash, it tightens the webbing, removes any loose part of the webbing from the body. So generally you have seen that when we wear the seat belt, there is a certain slackness in the belt from the body, due to which it was observed that despite of the seat belt, the occupant body used to travel at a higher pace than intended. So what pre-tensioner does is, as soon as the crash happens, there is a signal from the sensor, from the ECU to the seat belt, which ignites a particular gas. So that gas, in turn, basically how it works is, so there is a chamber in which gas is released and it drives the piston. The piston drives the spool and spool rotates and the belt gets wrapped around the retractor. Another variant of this pre-tensional load limiter is RPLL plus APT. So earlier there was only one pre-tensioner which used to remove the slack from the shoulder. APT is anchor pre-tensioner, and so what it does is, basically we are adding two pre-tensioners in the same seat belt. So it improves the pre-tensioner efficiency during a crash. Recently there was another development in the seatbelt technology, was CLT, crash locking current. So with ELR load limiter pre-tensioner, there is another component added in the tongue, which basically during the crash it locks the webbing to slip. So there is more efficient restraint of the occupant. Coming to the airbags. So as you know, like currently in India, the airbags, driver and the passenger airbags, have been made mandatory by the government, and every vehicle which now being sold in India will have at least driver and passenger airbag. Other than these, there are different type of airbags which are available in the vehicle. As you can see, a curtain airbag. This airbag generally helps to protect the injuries during a rollover or the sideways crash. So it basically it's basically located on the roof rail of the vehicle, and when there is, in case of vehicle turnover, it protects the occupants and minimize the injuries. Another type of airbag is side airbag, also known as seat airbag or pelvic airbag. So this airbag is generally located between the V pillar, the door, and the seat. So during the side crash scenario, when the vehicle hits the car from the side, this airbag deploys and minimizes the forces being transferred from the door to the occupant pelvis. Another one is knee airbag. This airbag is generally used in frontal crashes when the occupant legs hits the dashboard, the steering wheel, and a certain amount of injuries were caused. So this airbag basically prevents those injuries. So now, having discussed the major elements of the passive safety, what is the objective of the crash test basically? Why we do crash test? So crash test is generally done first of all, of course, to make a safe product, safe vehicle, injury reduction. So there has been constantly series of crash tests done on a vehicle to come up with new, better design, better ideas, and how to minimize the injuries. Performance rating. So you all must have seen nowadays there has been talk about vehicle star ratings, 1 star, 2 star, 5 star. So all those performance ratings are done based on the crash test performed inside the lab, and of course benchmarking. So very different OEMs perform crash tests to see where their vehicle stands and how in terms of crash worthiness, where they can compete with the other and existing vehicles. How much their vehicle is. So what enables these objectives? So basically a crash test is done inside a lab within a controlled environment to simulate the on-road conditions. So since everything is controlled and inside a lab, test results are more repeatable. So you can validate your design in a better way. Second is flexibility in input selection. So you can basically tweak various input parameters, which includes the speed. So you can test your vehicle at a lesser speed also to accommodate a different load case and a higher speed also. Other than speed, you can of course so during a crash can on basically when we do a crash test in a laboratory, we are doing it as per some guidelines, some procedure. But when you are on road, a crash test is uncertain, and maybe you can, based on the study, you can try to cover up as many cases of a load part of a crash scenario. But on actual road scenario, there might be a new case because there is so many variables are there on the road: the infrastructure, the road condition, the driver psychology, the driver condition, number of occupants. So all those cases can lead to some of the surprises on road. So to cover those, a crash test laboratory should be capable to cover as many as maximum crash scenarios to be conducted inside the lab. Now coming to the crash test facility. So before going further, I would just like to show you some of the crash test videos so that you can relate to the crash test facility more closely. Can you help me on the video? Okay, so what you just saw was starting from the dummy calibration videos, which we, so all these videos were captured inside of IK test, which we have, the facility which we currently have, and what we do inside our lab. So in the starting, there were videos showing the calibration of dummy parts. So we will be discussing in the coming slides. So generally, the dummies which are used in a vehicle have to be calibrated as per certain procedures. So each part, like the head, the chest, legs, are individually, independently calibrated to check whether they are performing in the intended manner. Then there were other test videos of pedestrian testing, component level testing like the seat airbag, seat belt test. So all these components are tested. So there are certain regulations for all these components which are tested in independent before the crash. And of course, then there is full vehicle crash test with all the instrumentation, the dummies, to check the overall vehicle performance. So now we'll be discussing the crash test facility in detail, which is the core for performing any crash test. So first comes the drive system. So drive system is basically the heart of crash test facility. So as you can see, a drive system is nothing but an arrangement of a wire rope, steel wire rope running around a motor, electromechanical motor. So how it works is the motor basically drives the rope and the vehicle gets attached to the rope through a tow skate or a trolley, which you can see on the right side of the screen. So if you consider a certain linear portion of the wire, the vehicle will be propelled by the trolley when the wire rope will be running onto the motor, and eventually it will go and crash the barrier. So here is the details of what present system is available in ICAT. So ICAT has a big electromechanical motor of 480 volts, which is capable of testing a crash or at 85 kmph with vehicle weight of 3500 kg. So of course, since the energy is constant, if we can go, if you decrease the weight, more high-speed crash can be done. And the speed accuracy which we maintain is of 0.25 km/h. The total track length which is available in ICAT is 110 meters, and the acceleration range from the starting is 0.1 g to 0.5 g. So this was a brief about the drive system in ICAT. Coming on to the second element is the crash barrier. So barriers are a very important part of a crash test, because barrier basically represents a second vehicle. So there is a test vehicle which we test against a barrier, but if you transfer it onto the on-road condition, a barrier generally represents the other vehicle which with the test vehicle is being crashed. So there are generally two major categories of barriers. One is the rigid barriers or the fixed barriers. Another one is the moving barriers. So I will explain each barrier one by one, starting from the rigid concrete barrier. So this barrier is generally used in full frontal crash. So there is this concrete barrier which weight around 70,000 tons. So 70,000 kg, sorry. So this barrier is the full face of the vehicle gets impacted onto the barrier during a full frontal crash test. On the right side is the offset deformable barrier, the ODB. So this is generally the most common barrier used. during the frontal offset crash. So what does 40% offset means here is that the barrier is aligned with an offset of 10% from the center of the vehicle. So basically, offset is nothing but the portion of the vehicle which will overlap the barrier during the crash. So you must be wondering why this scenario or why this case is was developed, because generally the car would crash with the full face. So based on the on-road data, it was observed that during a crash scenario, both the vehicles try to maneuver away from each other to prevent the crash. And during that condition, when the crash really happened, only the 40% of both the vehicles used to overlap against each other. So this barrier, as you can see, it's basically a honeycomb barrier. So this barrier is designed to exactly simulate the structure of the other vehicle. So the properties, the nature of compression in this barrier will match exactly to what a car, if the car would have been there, will have acted against the car during a crash. Then below you can see the rear impact trolley for rear crash and the side impact trolley for the side crash. So basically these are moving type of barriers in which during the rear impact the test vehicle is kept stationary and this trolley comes from a distance and it hits the vehicle at a speed of 35 kmph. Similarly, in case of side impact, you can see a trolley and a barrier which is mounted in front of the trolley. So again, this barrier is of aluminium honeycomb barrier to simulate the properties of a frontal crash. And in case of side crash also, the vehicle is kept stationary, aligned, and the barrier comes and hit the vehicle at a specified speed. Then these are some advanced type of barriers which are, so these 4 type of barriers are very commonly used in all the regulatory tests. So by regulatory test I mean which are basically mandated by the government or any concerned authority in any country. And these barriers are more of a development test. So a vehicle OEM, if in case wants to make the vehicle extra safe, they generally perform different kind of tests. So like in case of like frontal pole, a pole generally simulates a tree. In case of highway condition, there are trees or poles on each side of the road. So to simulate the crash with those objects, this frontal pole test barrier is used. And similarly, there can be a side pole crash test. So these pole tests are also included in consumer group test, which are also known as NCAP test, New Car Assessment Program. We'll just touch upon it in our following slides. Then there is a 30-degree angular barrier in which the barrier is aligned at an angle of 30 degrees from the oncoming vehicle. Then there is underride barrier. This barrier is generally used to simulate a condition in which the car hits a more say a truck or a goods carrying vehicle. So these type of barriers, the crash test is generally used to simulate to test the performance of a RUPD, the rear under protection device installed on the truck, in which a passenger car may come speeding and hit it from the behind. Now coming on to the third element is video and the lighting system. So during any crash test, generally it is a matter of seconds. A typical crash takes around 80 to 150 milliseconds to complete. So such small amount of time cannot be witnessed by naked human eye. So in order to see, to evaluate, to analyze the crash event after the test, high-speed cameras are used. So generally, I would just like to share something on this. a normal video which we all see on TV, television or a movie is played at 30 FPS, which is 30 frames per second. So any series of photos or pictures which are played at 30 FPS will appear to be a moving video to a human eye. So in a crash test, the cameras which are used or the video recording which is done at 1000 FPS or 2000 FPS or even 5000 FPS in case of airbags. So it means that a camera will capture 1000 frames in 1 second. So when this happens, so these are very costly cameras, and when this happens, the shutter of the camera has to open and close 1000 times in a second. So that demands a very large amount of light which needs to be captured by the camera. So generally high-speed videography is compensated with high-speed lighting system. So the videos which you just saw, you could see the actual vehicle being crashed and the dummy and the airbag being deployed and the dummy moving forward. So all those videos were captured at 1000 millisecond. But if you play that video in a normal speed, it will appear as it like a blink. You will not be able to analyze anything. So in order to analyze various aspects of a crash test, this video and lighting systems are used. So as you can see on your screen, these are the snaps of various test setups. Like the top corner is the full frontal. Then there is this ODB, 40% ODB setup, which we in ICAT we have the overhead lights, the metal halide lights, capable of producing up to 1.5 lakhs of lux, which is quite enough to capture the crash event at up to 2000 FPS. Then there you can see a setup of MDB, the mobile deformable barrier, which is like the side crash test. Then there are underbody lighting and cameras. So you must have watched the underbody view in the video which I just shown to you. Other than that, there are also onboard cameras. So there are some parts which you might need to analyze from inside the vehicle. So for those, we generally use onboard cameras. So onboard cameras are specialized cameras which can sustain high shocks during the crash, and they are of course small in size to be easily mounted inside the vehicle at a desired location. So they can be mounted inside the bonnet, under the seat, or onto the dashboard, on the roof, inside the vehicle. So all these, so in ICAT there we have around 20 high-speed cameras, and the lights which are used. So earlier there used to be halogen lights, halogen bulbs, which were then replaced by metal halides, and nowadays these are replaced by LED lights. So LED lights are of course energy efficient, and the same lux of light which a metal light can produce, the same amount of the LED light which can produce will be half of the size. So it's a more advanced technology. And okay, now coming on to the fourth element which is instrumentation for capturing data. So a crash is nothing but a crash test in a lab is nothing but to check the performance of the vehicle. So in order to check the performance, you need to have data. So without data, a crash test would mean nothing. It is just equivalent to the on-road crash. So in order to capture as much as data from a crash test, because a crash test is a very costly test. It is not a small test. It generally includes a complete vehicle which gets destroyed, and of course it's a one-time test. You cannot repeat the test. You cannot redo the test. You cannot undo the test. So considering such criticality, specialized instrumentation was developed, which is used in crash test. So some of the instrumentation like which is involved in a crash we'll discuss. The first is the data acquisition system. So DAS or DAC is nothing but a multimeter. So during a crash, various sensors are used which provides voltages, which senses, and the output of the data is in volts. So DAS is nothing but a, you can say, a very precise multimeter which is capable to absorb the shock during a crash and which can capture that data at 20 kilohertz. So 20,000 seconds samples in a second. So it's a very sophisticated device with number of channels. So generally the DAS which is available in ICAT has a single DAS has 32 channels, means 32 different sensors data can be captured at once at 20,000 hertz of frequency. The other equipment is which is generally used in crashes, airbag timer unit. So this basically is nothing but a device which is used to fire the restraint systems, the airbags or the preconditioner during a crash test. Then there is a seatbelt displacement sensor. So what a seatbelt displacement, you can see a seatbelt, typical seatbelt displacement sensor on your screen. What it does is it just measure the movement or the displacement of the seatbelt during a crash. So during designing of a restraint system, OEM will be interested to see how much did the dummy move forward and what was the movement of the seatbelt. So in that particular case, this seatbelt displacement sensor is used. It's an optical based sensor and it senses it uses a laser and senses the movement of the belt. Then there is seatbelt load cell. So seatbelt load cell, as I mentioned earlier, when the seatbelt restrains the occupant, there is a high amount of forces included, which the seatbelts put onto the torso. So to measure the forces from that seatbelt, the seatbelt load cells are used. Then there is a string potentiometer. So string potentiometers are nothing but to measure the displacement. So if you can see in a typical crash test, there are just three physical quantities which we are focused on. One is the force, other is the acceleration, and the third is the displacement. So accordingly, there are the sensors which are most commonly used will be related to the measurement of force, which is the load cell, the displacement, which are potentiometers or the displacement sensor, and the third is the accelerometers, which measures accelerations. Similarly, you can see the other instrumentation which is used in crashes, like pressure sensors to measure the pressure on the surface. Then accelerometers. So accelerometer is the most important, I would say, the most important sensor during a crash, because accelerometer measures the acceleration at a local point. So these are small sensors which can be mounted as many on different locations on the vehicle, say the frontal structure, the seats, the doors, the dash, the IP, engine block, so anywhere. So accelerometer gives you individual acceleration acting onto that particular location of the vehicle during a crash. Then there are temperature sensors, gyroscopes to measure the angular velocity or the angular motion during a crash. So basically, generally the head, driver head or the passenger head during a crash does not follow a linear path, but it rotates. It follows an angular trajectory. To measure that, gyroscope is generally placed inside the skull of the dummy. Then there is a 2D video tracking software which is used to analyze the displacement of the velocity of the vehicle. So how it works is you put some known markers on the vehicle, and using a tracking software, you basically track the parameters on the software. Then there is one important equipment used in electric vehicles is high to low voltage converter. So generally all the EVs consist of very high voltages of around 500 to 600 volts, but all this electronics works on 12 volt DC. So in order to capture that high voltage and transfer to these instrumentations, there is a high to low voltage converter which is used in EV crash test. Now coming to the dummies. So all this instrumentation we just discussed are used with inside the dummies and of course along in the inside the vehicle. So crash test dummies can be classified into different groups based on the gender, based on the percentile, and of course based on the application. So considering based on the application, dummies can be classified into frontal impact dummies, rear impact dummies, side impact dummies. Based on the gender, a dummy can be classified into a male dummy, a female dummy, or a child dummy. And based on the percentile, the dummies are classified into 5th percentile, 50th percentile, or 95th percentile. So percentile, I'll just explain, is nothing but is the amount of population which that particular dummy represents. So basically a 95 percentile dummy will have its parameters or characteristics like the body mass, height, weight, which will cover the 95% of the population. So all this nomenclature were done when these dummies were initially developed and used for US Army. So these percentile was also done keeping in view the percentage of the size and the shape of the US population. So as I told, dummies are nothing but they are the representation of human body. Since in early days the crash tests were done using cadavers, the dead bodies, which of course had limitations, and you could not put the intended instrumentation inside a cadaver. So these dummies were developed to make use of the various sensors and capture as many as information from during a crash test. As I told, dummies can be classified on basis of percentile and gender. And generally a typical dummy during a crash includes 25 to 40 sensors in various regions of the head. We'll come to that. But the limit is the maximum number of sensors. There is no limit. That completely depends on what the objective of that particular crash test is. So here is just a brief history of a crash test dummy. So the first crash test dummy was developed in 1949 by the name Sierra Sam, which was particularly developed to test the aircraft in aircraft industry, to test the pilot ejection seats and the pilot restraints. Soon after there was more development, and in 1968 Sam Alderson introduced the VIP series of the dummy. So this VIP series of dummy was specially designed for the automotive sector, which we nowadays use in the car crash. Then 3 years after, in 1971, the first hybrid one was introduced by GM. Then there was developments. Hybrid 2 came, hybrid 3 came in 1976. So the dummies which you can see on your screen are all hybrid 3 series. So these presently all the regulation, like the regulatory test, involves the use of hybrid 3 series dummies. And the latest dummy, which is known as the Thor dummy, test device for human occupant restraint, was the first prototype started in 1995 and it got completed in 2018. So you can see it's almost more than 20 years which it took to develop the Thor dummy. So Thor dummy is nothing but a more, so what one question might arise that how these dummies differ from the previous generation. So generally it's a quest for 100% simulation of a human body. So of course, our human body is quite flexible, and unlike the dummy which is used in the crash test, so a Thor dummy would more closely replicate the human body in terms of say the neck movement, the spine characteristic, the hand motion. So more the advanced the dummy, the more closely it will have a replication of human body, and more the replication, the more closely you can rely on the crash test results. So generally, like talking about dummy instrumentation, there are, as I told, the three physical quantities are force, displacement, and acceleration. So for each type of parameter, specific instrumentation is used. The accelerometers, you can see a uniaxial accelerometer. So it's a very small in size, and hundreds and 200s of them can be used in a single crash test to capture acceleration throughout the vehicle body. Then the load cells. So load cells is okay. So talking about accelerometers, so various like different body parts experience different physical quantity during a crash. So just try to imagine during a crash, the head would face the maximum acceleration. So during this motion, due to momentum, the physical parameter which will mostly affect the head is the force. There will not displacement, there will be no force on it unless and until it strikes the steering wheel, but the parameter which will act is the acceleration. And due to that acceleration, the injury which it will affect is the fluid. So generally a human skull have a fluid in which the brain is stored. So due to this sudden acceleration, there is a chances of injury due to the fluid displacement. So that's why we use accelerometers in a head to measure the acceleration, and the same is the criteria which is set for evaluating the performance of a vehicle. Coming on to the neck, a neck would face a force. So when the neck will go forward or backward, there would be a rotational force on the neck. Similarly, there would be a linear forces in XYZ direction due to the head and the body. Coming on to the chest, you as I discussed previously, there will be a compressive force from the belt and the steering wheel. So it was observed that the major injury which was caused in the chest was not due to force or was not due to acceleration, but was due to compression. So the ribs, a human rib can only sustain certain amount of compression, and to evaluate that, displacement sensor is used inside the chest to measure the displacement. So potentiometers, as you can see, are nothing but to measure there is a string which measures the displacement at a particular body part. So yeah, continuing the injury, this is the injury evaluation during a regulatory test, which is presently applicable in India. So for any vehicle any company or OEM to sell their vehicle, they have to first get this crash test passed, and the parameter which is set to evaluate the vehicle is the injury criteria at different location of the human body. So as I told, someone might think that why only acceleration was kept in the head and only displacement was kept in the chest. So all this data was first studied and was based on the actual crash scenarios. So over the years, based on the causes of critical injuries on road, these parameters have been defined to evaluate the vehicle. Having said that, it is not that okay, suppose coming to head performance criteria, as per regulation it should be less than 1000. So 1000 is a unitless number. But what if one of the vehicle can have HPC at 998 and another vehicle can have a HPC at 1005? So do you really think that the vehicle which is at 998 will be safe and 1005 will be unsafe? So no, of course. So these criteria are just a numbers which is based on some history, on facts. So of course this 1000 will not, it's not like the human will be completely safe. These injuries are has been derived using AIS, abbreviated injury scale. So at these numbers would equate to the injuries which are moderate in nature. So there are like mild injury, moderate injury, then there will be serious injury, then severe and the critical. So the intention of this performance criteria is to make sure that these numbers, if the vehicle is, if the injuries in the dummy in a particular vehicle are within these numbers, it will only mean that the injuries will maximum go up to moderate level, will not pass the severe or the critical level. So that is how it has been designed. So if you can see, for a occupant head, there are two parameters which are tested, which are evaluated in a crash: HPC and the resultant head acceleration. Then for the neck, there is a tension criteria. Tension is nothing but the force in Z direction. So just imagine your neck being stretched. When the neck goes forward, a tensile force acts, and to limit that force, a criteria has been set. Similarly, the neck shear criteria is the force in the X and the Y direction. Then there is a bending movement in the neck when the head moves forward. So again, the maximum moment which can act onto the neck is 57 Newton meter for a vehicle to pass. Pass means the maximum the injuries which can happen will be of moderate nature. Then coming on to the chest, 3 number, there are two parameters which are tested. One is the compression, how much chest is compressed inside. That can be due to steering wheel or that can be due to seat belt. So the maximum compression which can occur is 50 mm for a vehicle to pass. Then the viscous criteria. So again, there is fluid inside the chest. So once there is an impact, the rate of compression is also critical. So it's not like if the chest is compressed less than 50, but if the rate of compression is huge, it will still lead to serious injuries. So the rate of compression is also defined and has been limited to 1 meter per second. Then there is injuries in the lower portion of the body, the femur, the thighs. So the femur force has been set so up to 9.07 kilonewton. Then there is knees. So in the knee, it is generally seen the displacement. So the maximum displacement which can occur in the knee is 15 mm. So beyond this 15 mm, it is considered unsafe and can lead to serious injuries. Then the tibia. So in tibia, there are generally two parameters. One is the compressive force, which should be less than 8 kilonewton, and then the tibia index. So tibia index is nothing but it's a unitless quantity which takes into account the forces and the moments acting onto the lower leg. So the value of tibia index should be less than 1.3. Okay, so all these things which I explained is done after the crash. So it's all the post-test crash analysis. So for this you need dedicated softwares to calculate all these injuries. So there are two kind of softwares which are used. One is the tracking software. So as you can see, there are markers pasted. So it's more of a visual software in which you might be, if you want to calculate, okay, how much did the A pillar or a particular B pillar or the steering wheel, how much did it displace during a crash? So you can track it afterwards using this tracking software. And the other kind of software is the injury calculation, which gathers all the information from the sensors using a DAS, and then there are predefined formulas which are imposed onto those data, and injuries are calculated. So that was majorly about the crash test facility. Now we will just briefly discuss the types of crash tests which are done. So full frontal crash test, So basically it's nothing but a vehicle being crashed onto the flat concrete barrier with the full face of the vehicle impacting the surface. So this kind of crash test is generally used to check the steering displacement. How much is the front structure capable of holding the forces, and how much the steering would displace inside the occupant zone. More the displacement, lesser the vehicle, lesser efficient the vehicle, because it will more chances of the occupant being injured. Second is the side impact. Side impact is nothing but a case where the vehicle is being hit from the sideways. Then side oblique pole, as I showed you during the barrier, it's nothing but the vehicle hitting the pole at an angle instead of perpendicular. Then 30-degree angular is the frontal crash test, hitting the barrier at a 30-degree. 40% offset, which is also one of the regulatory tests in which the vehicle hits. It's a frontal crash test, and the vehicle overlaps the barrier by 40%. Another extension to this 40% is 10% offset. So it's a more severe crash test, generally done during development test, in which the vehicle will only overlap 10% of the barrier. So if you see, lesser the overlap, lesser the area available on the vehicle to absorb that energy, because energy will be same, mass of the vehicle is same, speed is same. So more the area of the vehicle, better the vehicle can absorb the energy. So lesser the overlap, it's more severe, more forces will act on lesser area of the vehicle. So 10% offset is generally used to evaluate during development stages. Then there is rear impact, frontal pole, under right barrier, as I explained earlier, and far side impact. So far side impact is nothing but it's similar to side impact, but the vehicle is impacted onto the opposite side of the driver. So generally this is used to evaluate when the car hits when there is a side crash, the driver hits the door, the B pillar. So there are airbags available, there are door beams available to absorb the energy. But in case the vehicle is impacted from the farther side, there was observed that there were injuries due to the center console or the gear knob or some other structure. So to capture those cases also and to see if the vehicle is safe completely, far side impact test is done. This is the overview of Indian safety regulations. So I would just briefly discuss the regulation, describe what regulations holds for which test. So frontal, there is for ODB 56 tests and full frontal 48. So the Indian regulation, it's AIS, Automotive Indian Standards. So it lays down all the regulations, right, starting from 0 number to 150, 160, as more and more regulations comes into force. So for frontal test, AIS 098 is the standard against which the vehicle is tested. For full frontal, it's IS 11939 or AIS 96. So for each Indian standard, there is an equivalent European standard. So each country has its own standards. So for Europe, it's ECR 12. So similarly, for each and every type of test, there is the name of the Indian standard and equivalent European standard. I would just emphasize on a component level test like the pedestrian test. So in pedestrians, we test the head form and the leg form as per AIS 100, AIS 100. So all these regulations, you people can visit ICAT website, and all these regulations are available. You can have a look. So you would get an idea how the test preparation is done, what factors are considered during a test preparation, how the test results are analyzed. So it will give you a better picture. Then subsystem level test, as I discussed earlier, each component also is tested independently to check for its performance, like the seat. So seat is tested for its rigidity and the strength of the anchorages, that during a crash, there is no failure of the anchorages or the structure. So that is tested as per IS 15546. And the equivalent AIS is 016 and the ECR 70. Similarly, seat belt are tested as per IS 15140. Then there are side doors, beams, which are tested for as per IS 12009. There is energy dissipation test, EDP. So these are done on generally the components on the dash panel. So energy dissipation means that any component in a vehicle should not create high forces when hit by a dummy head. So the components, critical components are the sun visors, the dash panel, the knobs, the music system console, the steering wheel, the head restraints for the rear occupants. So all these components of a vehicle are tested for EDP as per ECR 17. Then of course there are development tests as per NCAPs or customer requirements. Like during a development stage, a manufacturer tries to cover as many as load scenarios for to make sure that, for example, an airbag. So generally, when we travel, there are small accidents in day-to-day commuting. So during that, OEM makes sure that during such cases, airbag should not fire because there is no use of that airbag. So like maybe if you crash a car at 10 kmph, you would want the airbag not to fire because again it would lead to cost, it would lead to more the rescue problems. So in that cases, OEM makes sure by conducting these tests, like simulating these tests inside the labs at various conditions. Then of course there is airbag test component level in which the airbag is deployed to check its deployment time, to check its deployment shape, how it deploys, if the unfolding of the airbag is in the right manner, etc. So I have already discussed about the injuries. Other than the injuries, there are certain physical performance checks after a crash test on a vehicle. These are the fuel system integrity. So it was again this why these performance checks are only there because there can be a number of checks. So again, all these checks, all these regulations have been designed considering the past data due to which maximum casualties were happening. So all those critical parameters were captured and only those are ensured that they are not crossing the regulatory limits. So in fuel system integrity, it was observed that after the crash, although the crash was, the vehicle was safe and the occupant remained safe during a crash, but due to fuel system failure, there was a fuel leakage and which caught fire, and due to fire, there was a casualty. So it was made sure that after the crash, the vehicle fuel system should remain intact. There should be no leakage. Then occupant rescue. Again, it might be the case that the occupant is safe due to airbags and the structure and the design of the vehicle, but after the crash, the occupant could not evacuate the vehicle, and due to suffocation, there was a casualty. So under occupant rescue, it is made sure that after the crash, at least one of the door in each row should be opened, can be opened in a vehicle. And other thing is the belt. So after the crash, the belt should not stuck. It should be opened with a minimum amount of force. The prescribed limit is 60 Newton as per regulation. So occupant can rescue. Other than that, there is a recent additional requirement, not in regulatory test, but in development test, which is e-call feature. So e-call is nothing. How it is that after the crash, there would be certain logic in the vehicle which would automatically call a particular call center or a administrative body or a police body. So after the crash, a call would be made automatically to inform that a certain crash has happened and necessary health facility, ambulance or police reaches the spot. Then the third one is the steering column displacement. So other than all the injuries, there has been a limit set to the displacement of the steering column. During a crash, a steering column should not move inward of the vehicle beyond a certain value. So that was about the basic regulatory test which each country, each manufacturer in each country has to meet. There are certain advanced tests which are known as consumer group tests, and which are generally you must have came across in media, like certain vehicle is 4-star, certain vehicle is 5-star. So there is a consumer body known as NCAP, which takes a vehicle from the market and test it against a more severe condition. So in India, for example, the frontal crash is conducted at 56 km/h, but a consumer group test, the vehicle is tested at 64 kmph. So there are certain more requirements which are generally which generally happens on in a real road crash test. So each country, based on the geography or the region, NCAP is has been divided into further bodies like A NCAP, Australian NCAP, Asian NCAP, Latin NCAP, Euro NCAP, Japanese NCAP, and there is a like there in order to standardize the requirements, a body was formed known as Global NCAP. So of course, like Euro NCAP will have is the most advanced NCAP, and like currently Euro NCAP uses a Thor dummy, the most advanced dummy, and they even evaluate the performance of a vehicle on based on ADAS active safety features. So maybe some another country which is not so developed might not able to meet those requirements. So each country has its own NCAP protocols with own requirements, but there is a standard body, Global NCAP, which considers the overall scenario, and the GNCAP, Global NCAP requirements are kept at a nominal level so that each manufacturer can meet it in considering all the regions. This is generally a representation of like the color coding scheme for NCAP injury criteria. So if the region is green, it means so for on each website, NCAP website, you can check the rating of a particular car, and there this diagram is generally given. So green means it's good, and red means poor. So this color coded diagram is just for easy representation of how the injuries are there. And what does the star rating means? So this is nothing but a normal scale based on some points. Stars are given, and overall, generally, if you generalize it, a 5-star vehicle, it is just the chances of serious injuries will be less than 10%. So as I told, nothing is sure. So it is all probability and based on the on-road condition. So any crash, any vehicle which meets the crash is meeting the crash in a laboratory, but on road there might be number of noise factors, number of variables, number of independent variables which might affect the results. So 5-star will make sure that the vehicle will have a probability of meeting, like protecting the occupant and restricting the severe injuries in 10% of the cases. Then 4-star will have a chance of 20% of serious injuries. And similarly, a 1-star vehicle will have a chance of 46% or greater serious injuries caused to the occupant. Similarly, there is a chart for side impact test in which 5-star means 5% and lower, and similarly, 1-star vehicle will have a chance of 26% or greater for serious injuries. Well, that was it for today. Thank you so much all for your attention. In case of any questions. So there is one question from Mr. Ganesh. In India, which safety crash test is mandatory as of today? So currently in India, there are 3 crash tests which are mandatory. One is the 40% offset as per AIS 98. I would just go to that slide. Then there is a side impact MDB 50 as per AIS 99, and a full frontal test as per IS 11939. So you can broadly say there are 3 crash tests which are currently as on date mandatory for Indian manufacturers. There is one question from Mr. Sangeet. The crash test done by ICAT, ARI and GRC are same. So yeah, Government of India planned in a way that to set up different test centers at different locations to assist the automotive industry. And yeah, as per regulation, if you say a test is being conducted as per AIS 98, then you can conduct the test anywhere in the world. The procedure will be same. So that is why these regulations are formulated, so that there should not be variation from test to test center, and a test results can be compared globally. Okay, I could see some other questions. Maybe due to constraint of time, I'll try to answer those questions on mail. How much G-force is generally used to simulate front, rear, and side crash, respectively? So again, this G-force is like in case of a front impact, the peak G which goes is up to 38 to 42 Gs. Again, depends on the vehicle structure. So all this data is captured from the actual crash test. So if the structure is soft means you could see that in some of the vehicles there is more deformation, and people generally say that that vehicle is bad. But a vehicle, whether the vehicle is good or bad, cannot be just determined seeing the vehicle after the crash. A vehicle might be designed to get deformed, to get damaged as like more, and to absorb more energy, protecting the occupants. So again, if the vehicle is soft, the pulse would be softer, the duration will increase, the magnitude will decrease. But generally, if you as a thumb rule, for front crash, it's generally within 35 to 40, and for side crash is also around 32 to 34 Gs. Well, thank you. Thank you for your attention. Have a good day.
Thank you all for joining. We would like to request you all to kindly visit aspire.icat.in. We have so many projects available for students and grant challenges. We have another webinar coming up on trending topic electric vehicle technologies on 18 June. You can find the registration link on Aspire website. So thank you so much. Stay healthy, stay safe.